Welcome to the Lemons and Pineapples podcast, the personal development podcast for folks who want more fulfillment, connection, purpose, and joy in life. I'm your host, Emma O'Brien, a no-nonsense coach, a seasoned entrepreneur, photographer, rescue dog mum, and happy life enthusiast. Each week on the podcast, I share tools, tips, and strategies, amazing guest interviews, and uplifting conversations that will help you improve all areas of your life. Let's dive in. Hi, folks. A very warm welcome to Season 4, Episode 8 of the Lemons and Pineapples podcast with me, Emma O'Brien. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about how to stop over-functioning in your relationships. This episode is inspired by Harriet Lerner's book, The Dance of Anger, which I've just read for the second time. It's a really interesting read if you want to understand more about the dynamics of intimate relationships. I think it's mostly she applies this stuff to spousal relationships, but a lot of it applies to relationships with children, relationships with co-workers, relationships with family members. This book in particular, she talks about over-functioning and under-functioning, which I'm going to share my takeaways and what I learned from this book about that. She's also got another book called The Dance of Intimacy, which again is about how to change the dynamics within your intimate relationships. So these are really, really interesting reads. If you are wanting to know more about relationships, wanting to improve your relationships, and perhaps wanting to understand why there are particular patterns showing up in your relationships that you want to try and change, but somehow can't figure out how to. Really, really powerful books to read. So let's talk about over-functioning. Over-functioning happens when you pick up the slack for other people, when you are doing everything in a relationship for other people. One of the best examples of this, I think, in intimate relationships, so we're talking spousal relationships, particularly here with this example, is doing all the emotional heavy lifting. And if you are a woman in relationship with a man, the chances are you are probably the person who is doing the emotional work. I'm generalizing a lot here. It won't be the same for everybody, but I can say from my own experience, that is what happens in my own relationship. If there's a difficult conversation that needs to be had, if there's some tension in the air, I am the person who steps in to start the conversation because I have a husband who is very conflict averse. So it's really interesting to start to have a look at how over-functioning and under-functioning shows up. So one of the questions you can ask yourself if you're listening to this and you're going, oh, this is new, I'm not quite sure about this, is who in your life do you pick up the slack for? Who in your life do you look at and think, I'm pretty sure if I need something, you're not going to do it. So I'm just going to get it done rather than waiting for you. How does it make you feel when you step into that role of over-functioning, of being the organizer, of being the one who effectively does more than your fair share in a relationship dynamic? And this might play out at work with a co-worker. However it plays out, it's really interesting to start to identify these dynamics and how they show up in your life, because when we can identify them, we have the power to change them. When things are unconscious and we have patterns that show up and we might be kind of aware there's a pattern, but we're not really sure how it's playing out, until you're aware of it, you can't change it. And the thing with over-functioning and under-functioning is it's a dynamic between two people. An under-functioner requires somebody to over-function so they can keep under-functioning. That's the way it is. And as soon as you pull yourself back and stop over-functioning, you give the other person the room and the space to step up and to bring the relationship into a more equal footing. But often if you're an over-functioner, which I am, you don't even allow that to happen because you make the assumption that because a bajillion times before the other person hasn't stepped up, it's just easier to do it yourself. It's easier to take care of it. You don't run the risk of being disappointed. You don't have to kind of wait on somebody. You don't have to rely on somebody else. So it's very interesting to notice where in life you might be over functioning. And this is, again, not wanting to generalize, but women often overfunction, especially at home. So if you have a family dynamic where you've got multiple children, as a woman, you're probably the person who's organizing everybody for everything. And you may well have a partner who just allows you to do that. And maybe you feel resentful because you're like, why is it always me doing everything here? But I would invite you to have a look at, do you ever A, ask anybody else to help you? And B, do you give anybody else room to help you? A more kind of light-hearted example, I suppose, in my house is I overfunction with the household appliances. I am in charge. I am very fastidious about splitting colors when they go into the washing machine. My husband's like, "What the hell is wrong with you? Just throw it all in." Dude, I've got jumpers from Zara that I would like to look after, and they need to be washed specifically with specific detergent. We don't just throw them in with your engineering pants that have been wandering around a factory all day. He doesn't understand that. I do. So I'm the one who takes charge of the washing machine because I can't rely on him to do that because he doesn't understand why I'm fastidious about it. Loading the dishwasher is another thing. Even though I'm married to an engineer, he loads the dishwasher. I don't even know how he loads the dishwasher with absolutely no logic applied whatsoever. So I will go and restack the dishwasher. So he then doesn't load the dishwasher because he knows I like to do it a particular way and I'm going to reorganize whatever he does so he doesn't do it. So if I wanted to stop over functioning with the dishwasher, I could actually just sit back and not rearrange it and just let him load it and switch it on because then he might do it more often. So there's this it's a very interesting dynamic, and this is a very surface level example without oversharing too much of my personal life on the podcast here. So why do we overfunction? What sets that up? And I think this is something that's very, very important to look at. Often we overfunction because we've been set up to be disappointed by other people. There's a setup of I can't rely on other people. There is a setup of it's just better and quicker to do it myself. So I know for me, I am pretty hyper independent. So one of the reasons I overfunction is I'm just going to do it, and then I don't have to worry about somebody letting me down or anything like that. So underneath the overfunctioning will be a set of beliefs that perhaps need to be looked at and dismantled a little bit to adjust your own behavior. Because, like I said earlier, when we overfunction, we give somebody else room to underfunction. And then overfunctioners get very resentful because the underfunctioners just don't do anything. But again, often it'll be because we're not actually asking specifically for what we want. So if you're somebody who's like, I have to do it all, nobody helps me, my question for you would be, when was the last time you asked for help? When was the last time you said to the other person in your house who you feel doesn't help you, or the other person at work, or the friend, or whoever it is that doesn't help you, when was the last time you explicitly said, please, can you do this? It would be really helpful for me. Please, can you do this? When did you last overtly ask for what you wanted? And my guess is you probably haven't. And we tend to sort of get into martyr mode a little bit when we overfunction. And perhaps it's from a dynamic in childhood of it wasn't safe to ask for what you wanted. Maybe you got shouted at. It wasn't safe to speak your truth. Maybe somebody told you off or punished you. We have all of these things that set up our behavior in adulthood. And until we start to have a look back and go, why do I do this? What is it I need to work on? Nothing changes. So overfunctioning in an intimate, like a spousal relationship, it really does kill intimacy because you end up almost in a parent-child relationship when you're doing all the stuff for somebody and you're like, oh my God, I could just do without this. It's just, all the stories we tell ourselves about it. And then somebody else almost is allowed to not do anything because you're picking up all the slack. And there is nothing sexy about being in a relationship to someone who you effectively parent in some capacity. And it's really the way around this is to notice you're overfunctioning and stop doing it. Notice it, understand why you're doing it, and stop it. But in stopping it, you're going to have to ask for what you want. You're going to have to ask somebody to help you, and you're going to have to allow somebody to help you. So with the dishwasher example, I would have to allow my husband to load it in the really illogical fashion and just not say anything and not need to jump in and control the whole thing. Okay. I'm totally open to the fact I am a control freak, so I own that entirely. Um, and sometimes you have to, with stopping over functioning, especially if you're organizing everything for somebody else. For example, maybe you're the person who organizes all of the home appointments, is you have to be prepared to sit back and allow somebody else to fail and to figure it out on their own. So if you have a partner who says to me, "Oh, I need you to please remind me about my dentist appointment. I need you to please remind me about the taking the kids somewhere later," I would argue actually you need to step up for yourself and manage your own schedule. I'm not your mother. You need to do that and get that done. And in taking a step back and allowing somebody to step up for themselves, you almost need to allow them to make a mistake. They might not make a mistake. This is the thing. If you allow somebody to just step up, they might step up if you give them the room, but they might make a mistake, and you have to allow them to feel the consequences of that mistake so they learn from it. So often we're jumping in to control things, we're jumping in to make sure everything runs smoothly because we're not necessarily sure it's going to. And you need to be able to sit in that discomfort of the uncertainty of not knowing quite what's going to happen. The next thing that will happen if you decide to stop your role as an overfunctioner in the relationship dynamic you're in is the other person is going to have a reaction to that. So what Harriet Lerner calls this is a change back reaction. So in you stopping being the overfunctioner, you're going to have a bit of pushback from the other person because they're going to go, "Oh, hang on a minute. Why is she not managing everything for me? Why is she not doing this for me?" And they will probably start to act out a little bit. And maybe there's going to be a little bit of blaming, maybe there's going to be some shaming, maybe there's going to be some complaining. Take the dentist appointment example. So let's say you manage all of your partner's appointments and you remind them to go to the dentist, but you're fed up with doing that because you've already got your own schedule to manage without managing another adult's schedule. Is maybe they miss a dental appointment. And then instead of taking responsibility for that, because they're not used to doing that because you've been doing it, they come back to you and they say, "You didn't remind me about the dentist appointment, so I've missed it." And it was that they charged me a surcharge. It's your fault. You should have reminded me. Now, if you're an overfunctioner, because it is easier to not have your ask for to have your needs met, it's easier to not speak your truth. It's going to be massively triggering to have somebody almost attack you for not doing your overfunctioning because they're underfunctioning. And in order to not keep going back into the dynamic, that is your opportunity to then take a step back and say, "Well, you're a grown up, you can manage your own dental appointment." Because the fact is, if you're in relationship with another able-bodied, fully functioning adult, they will be managing all of their appointments at work just fine. They're just choosing to allow you to do things at home because that's the way it's always been done, because it's easier to have you manage that for them. So you're inviting someone to step up, and often people don't necessarily want to do that. So in changing this dynamic, you have to be prepared to sit in a bit of discomfort as the dynamic changes, and you give somebody else room to find their feet in their new role of taking responsibility for all the things that you used to take responsibility for. Very interesting. I highly recommend reading this book to figure out a little bit more about it, about how it plays out, why it plays out. And really, it is a case of standing your ground. Now, I mostly coach women, so I come at this from a quite a female perspective. And often, as women, we want to be useful, we want to be valuable, we want to look after people, we want to nurture, and it's often done at our own expense. And the real work of figuring life out for yourself, stepping up for yourself, and being self-led and not feeling resentful, asking for what you want and getting what you want is about unpacking why it is you're in a dynamic where you don't speak out. You're not speaking your truth. You're perhaps living for other people. You're perhaps playing second fiddle to other people. in a relationship. And this is often down to the stories we tell ourselves and the beliefs we hold about ourselves, and also the things we've had mirrored to us growing up. There's also an element of intergenerational behaviors that we operate from. I'm going to talk more about that in a future episode because it's a really, really interesting piece to start looking at, especially if you find you've got patterns in your life and you're not really sure where they've come from or how to shift them, or maybe you've tried to shift them with no success because they're so ingrained. It's when we start to have a look at the deeper stuff that's happening under the hood. This is work that I'm really passionate about doing, and I have just created a brand new breakthrough session, which is a 75-minute coaching session specifically aimed at helping you uncover a core belief that is keeping you stuck in a pattern, that is keeping you stuck in your life and not allowing you to move forwards, and something that you can't necessarily intellectualize your way out of. You might be aware that you do it and you might have tried to change it, and it's just you can't and you don't know why. There's deeper stuff at play, and it's often subconscious stuff at play. So if you resonate with this and you've got something you want to move and change, but you don't really know where to begin, this is the perfect session for you. It's a once-off session. It's really, really powerful. This work can happen surprisingly quickly. So if you want to know more about that, you can go to the show notes. You can directly just go ahead and book a breakthrough session with me if you know you want that. Otherwise, if you want to know more about it, you can also book a free connection call with me and we can just chat about what's happening. And we can just kind of unpack a little bit of what's at play and what's going on in life, because often this over functioning is symptomatic really of deeper things that are happening and other ways that you are playing small and not choosing yourself. You're allowing everybody else to go ahead of you and all everybody else's needs to be met before yours are, which doesn't really make for a particularly happy or fulfilling way of being. So I'm here to help you change that. So you can find out more in the show notes. Thank you for listening today. I'd love to know if you've read either of Harriet Lerner's books. I'd love to hear from you. You can pop me a DM on Instagram, let me know. I love to hear about books that have been really interesting and life-changing. And if you've read these books, your perspective on what showed up here and how you use the information you learned and how it's helped you change things. So thank you for being with me. I will see you again soon. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, please leave me a 5-star rating and a review, and make sure you share this episode with a friend who you know will also enjoy it. I'd love to connect with you on Instagram. Please drop me a DM and say hi at Emma O'Brien Coach. And for more information about coaching with me, please head to my website, which is emmaobrien.coach.com.